What is up, high school friends? I am so excited to be with you tonight. I don't know if you have noticed, but this is our 5th week in our series, What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do. And friends, I have an announcement for you. This is actually our last recorded YouTube premiere series that we're going to be doing for the rest of the summer. We can't really tell you what we're going to be doing this summer because we don't really know yet. Things are still kind of up in the air with all of this COVID stuff. But I will let you know that as soon as we know, we will let you know. So just make sure you're following us on social media and that your parents are getting our emails because we will be sending out the information to you as soon as we know it. If it's a little windy or if you feel like you're hearing trees or dogs barking, it's because I'm outside. I just like being outside, so I thought, what better place to do my sermon than outside. I feel like Aubrey and I have been spending a lot of time outside actually during all of this COVID mess, and I think it's because I'm just tired of hanging out in my home. But I miss you guys, and I am so excited for this sermon tonight. I think it's going to be a solid one. So let's go ahead and jump into that bumper video.
So, when you don't know how to do something, how to fix something, or how something works, what do? Ask a teacher? Ask your parents? Ask your friends? Ask someone you really know and trust? No! You go to the internet and ask some randos. But I'm not talking about creeps here, I hope. No, I mean the people of the internet! You know, those people who make how-to videos. Because chances are, if you're trying to figure out something, someone on the internet has already figured it out for you. Things like, how do I unsend a text? No. How do I do a winged eyeliner? How do I get rid of the zit by Friday night? How do I get out of gym class? How do I screen cap Snapchat without getting caught? They'll never know. But then there are things in life that don't have an easy fix, that don't have a simple solution, that don't have a how-to video. Things like what to do when you have problems with family, or when it seems like you have no control in your life, or what to do when someone has done something to you. I mean, clearly, they gotta go. The truth is, there's a lot of life that doesn't have a solution you can just find online. So how do you know what to do when you don't know what to do?
So when I was in high school, my friends and I went to Taco Bell a lot, and I still do that. But we loved it. It was one of the best places you could go to as a high school student. I remember we'd go to there, and we'd go to Taco Villa. I could get fries and a bean burrito from Taco Villa for $3.83. But we would just choose all the cheapest places because we knew we didn't have a lot of money. And it was good quality food, and I love Taco Bell, still do to this day. I live 500 feet from one. But back then, even though we would go to Taco Bell for the fact that you could get like 3 burritos for $3, the problem was for me is, as a sophomore in high school, $1 was still kind of a lot of money for me. So there was lots of days when I'd show up to Taco Bell and I didn't have enough money. So I'd kind of play it off like I wasn't hungry. And I had a good friend, his name was Caleb, and he'd kind of notice that I wasn't really not hungry. It was actually a money issue rather than a hunger issue. So he'd come over to me and he'd tell me, you know what? Order a couple of tacos, man. I got you. And every time Caleb would cover me, I'd say, you know what, man, thanks so much. I'll pay you back. Don't worry. Whenever I get the money, I'll pay you back. And he would always say, no matter what, it's not a big deal. No worries. You're good. You don't have to pay me back. And to this day, I still remember that. So I was a poor sophomore who couldn't afford to buy cheap tacos. And Caleb was a junior with an actual job who picked up my tab without asking for payback. When here we are. But not asking to be paid back is kind of heartwarming when it comes to borrowing money for tacos. But other times, it's kind of complicated. See, outside of paying back money back to someone you owe, the idea of payback also comes up when someone hurts us. For example, when someone talks about us behind our back, we probably want payback. When someone flirts with our girlfriend or boyfriend, we want payback. When someone fails to text us back or maybe even invite us to a group outing, we want payback. See, and in those moments when we've been hurt, we want payback. Maybe you don't go all scary movie and get terrifying revenge or go Taylor Swift and write a song about them. But we all want to get payback in one way or another. We want them to feel the pain and the hurt we felt. We want them to be embarrassed the way we were embarrassed. Our first reaction is almost always to get even, or at least get something in return, even if it's just knowing our shady Snapchat comment was actually about them. Snady? I don't know where that came from. Even if it's just knowing our shady Snapchat comment was actually about them. And isn't it true that the closer we are to a person, the more we want payback? See, most of you aren't trying to pay back someone else's brother or sister. Your feelings probably aren't hurt because of someone else's best friend. And you probably aren't angry because of what someone else's ex did. The people who are closest to you and the people who know you have the most potential to hurt you. So they're most likely to be on your list of people who owe you payback. For most of us, payback comes in one of three ways. The first is public payback. This is when we do to them what they did to us in an obvious way. We talk bad about them. We talk bad about the person who talked bad about us. We clap back loudly. I can't believe I just say that. Or we roast them and say, you know what, just kidding, sorry. Or there's passive payback. And this is where it's a little bit more subtle. We make comments that aren't obviously hurtful, but they might be interpreted that way. We put the subtle post on social media, the subtweet of sorts. We roll our eyes maybe when someone's talking about us, or we ignore someone's text. Or there is the third one, and that's called imaginary payback. And personally, I think I'm an expert of this kind, because imaginary payback happens when we have an argument in our mind, and, well, we destroy them in our mind. We have a better argument, a better comeback, and we annihilate them. It takes over our thoughts, but we never actually do anything. See, and then there's perhaps the most satisfying payback of all. Enjoying watching them fail. Like when our ex broke up with us for someone else, and then he or she gets dumped. Or our mom snapped at us and hurt our feelings, and now she's crying and apologizing, and it's the perfect setup for us to put an exclamation mark on her regret. Or maybe it's that guy who made fun of us in third grade, and we for real still hate him. You can tell by the way my voice is getting rough. That's how much I hate him. But he face plants during the pep rally game. It's in those moments it feels like justice. It feels good to see someone get what's coming to them, whether it's good or bad. And that is exactly the sort of situation Joseph found himself in as we wrap up his story this week. See, in this series, we've been journeying through the life of Joseph, whose story is found in the book of Genesis. And his story is a wild one, where sometimes we often have no idea what to expect next. See, early in this series, we talked about how Joseph knew he was in his dad's favorite, and he rubbed it in his brothers' faces. Joseph also had dreams where he was in charge of the whole family, and then he told his other brothers about it. He wasn't really the most self-aware guy. And since Joseph was super annoying, his brothers plotted to kill him, which seems like a slight overreaction. But instead they saw a group traveling through town, and they decided to make a little money by selling Joseph as a slave. Throughout the rest of the series, we've covered how Joseph was a slave in Egypt. We covered how Joseph was a slave in prison in Egypt, and how Joseph, as the man who interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh, was the ruler of Egypt. See, Joseph was eventually placed in charge of all of Egypt, second in command to Pharaoh. Not a bad outcome for a kid who was sold into slavery by his brothers. See, but then there's a plot twist. After Joseph was second in command, there was a food shortage where his family lived. So Joseph's dad, Jacob, sent his brothers to Egypt to ask for food because their country was out and they were starving. See, it was at this point in the story, Joseph's family thought he was dead. So of course, they weren't even thinking about the possibility of seeing Joseph when they got to Egypt to ask for food. When they arrived in Egypt and they saw Joseph, not knowing it was Joseph, a huge drama unfolded. You can read some of these interactions, and I encourage you to, between Joseph and his brothers in Genesis 42 through 50. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. Reading through the back and forth, knowing the backstory, it's kind of like a movie, and it's just really good. I really encourage you to read it after you're done listening to this sermon. But we're going to pick up in Genesis 45. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all of his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. This is Genesis 45, 1 through 3. Imagine the tension and emotion of the moment. So Joseph was face to face with the people who tried to kill him, his own brothers who sold him into slavery. The same brothers who, ironically, right now, were asking him for help. See, this was a great moment that could have been get what's coming to you type of thing. It was, everything had been set up so perfectly for payback to be put upon Joseph's brothers. Payback was dropped in Joseph's lap. So Joseph could have refused them food. He could have thrown them into prison and maybe given them a taste of their own medicine. He could have even had them killed. They were certainly willing to do that to him, as we saw earlier. So what would you do? What would you do if you were Joseph? I mean, I don't know if you need to write it out in the chat, but in your own head, be honest with yourself. What would you have done with all that power to hurt the person or the people who had hurt you the most? Honestly, I don't know what I would have done. And as the story continues, Joseph asked his brothers to walk over and stand close to him. You can imagine the terror the brothers felt in this moment. Joseph said this. He says, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God has sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been a famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance." This is Genesis 45, 4b through 7. Now there's only one reason Joseph could have responded the way that he did. He didn't try to get payback because he already had let go of the idea of revenge. He had already done the hard work of forgiveness. How do we do that? Because Joseph could look in the eyes of the ones who had caused him the most grief, and he cared about how they were feeling. When Joseph said, "Do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here," acknowledging their wrong and his hurt without creating more hurt. Only a healed person could do this. Only someone who had forgiven could do this. So Joseph chose forgiveness over payback. And we see that in the moment when he had the greatest opportunity for revenge. Somewhere between being sold into slavery and being reunited with his brothers, Joseph did the hard work of giving his hurt to God and allowing God to be central in his healing. So that's why Joseph was quick to acknowledge God in the area where his brothers had caused him the most pain. It didn't make what his brothers did okay. It didn't make Joseph's pain any less. It just took the real pain and the real hurt and no longer put them center stage. It put God there instead. And that made forgiveness possible. Forgiveness was not only for his brothers, it was freedom from his own pain too. See, Joseph went on to tell his brothers to go get their father and move the entire family to Egypt because the famine would continue, and without making this move, his family would suffer. And when this happened, this is what happened with Joseph and his brothers. And he went over to them and he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Afterwards, his brothers talked with him. This is Genesis 45:15. Friends, that may be the only thing better than payback. Reconciliation. See, this is where we see God do the impossible in a relationship. Bring peace when there has only been hurt. All because of forgiveness. When it comes to other people hurting us, we too have the opportunity to choose something better than payback. In fact, here's a simple way for you to remember it. When you don't know what to do, pursue peace instead of payback. When you pursue peace, you fight for the relationship. In other words, you can fight to win, to be right. You can fight to make a point, or you can fight the urge for payback and pursue peace. But you can't do both. Joseph preserved his relationship with all of his brothers because he chose peace. And he was only able to do that because he fought for forgiveness. And he was only able to forgive with the help of God. Joseph didn't have a superpower that allowed him to do this. He just had the determination to do the work of peace required and an understanding of God at work in his situation, which means you and I can do this too. When you pursue peace, you lay down your right to get payback. You let go of revenge. You say goodbye to your desire to get even. Instead, you choose the path of forgiveness. You choose God's story of reconciliation instead of your own story of payback and revenge. Now, this is easier said than done and something you may have to work at daily, but the ultimate benefit, friends, is for you. You not only have peace with them, you have peace in you. Here's why this is so complicated. Because what happened to you isn't exactly what happened to Joseph. In fact, I could tell dozens of stories and none of them would be exactly like yours. Maybe you've spent the whole time wondering, do you always have to reconcile? What about when it's toxic? What if you're the one who did the hurting? See, each of us have unique and complicated situations, and figuring out what it looks like to pursue peace in those situations isn't always easy. That's why our Zoom small groups right after this are so important. We want you to talk about what this looks like for you in your situation, in your real life, with your friends and your family. So as you head out and you jump over to our Zoom, think about what you have the power to do when it comes to pursuing peace. What do you need to decide? Who do you need to forgive? What offense do you need to bring to God? Friends, He can do incredible things in your story that you might not even be able to imagine yet. So when you don't know what to do, pursue peace instead of payback. Friends, this semester has been crazy. I think we did this sermon series because Shane and I didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to do, and it's been hard. Not seeing your faces has really shown to me that I want to be a youth pastor for a long time, and being a youth pastor over Zoom is not my favorite. And I miss you guys. I miss your faces. I hope that COVID hasn't affected you in a negative way financially or with school. But I definitely don't want it to affect your faith. So friends, even though we still can't really see each other yet, Just know that Shane and I are always praying for you. Shane and I are always thinking about you, and you can always reach out to us. I will put our emails in the description. You can always message us over Instagram or Facebook. Friends, just know that we love you. It would hurt me the most if I knew that COVID had affected your faith because you didn't have the chance to talk to us. But I also want you to know that you can do so much on your own. Friends, there are so many resources for you in this age that we live in called the internet, right? Our church has a subscription to a thing called Right Now Media. Right Now Media is basically like the Netflix of Bible studies. There's literally thousands of videos that you can walk through. And friends, there's so many great churches online that are doing sermons and doing walkthroughs of books. There's YouVersion. YouVersion is so great. The Bible app. There's like Bible studies that you can go through together. There's like, it'll send you a daily notification about how you should remind to do this, so you can't be like, I forgot to read my Bible. You can't say that because your phone told you to. There's so many resources for you to grow in your faith. So I hope that even though you might be looking for help from Shane and I, and that is always available, there is also so many resources for you to find on your own. And if you'd like to know more about those, you can always ask us. Friends, I love you. I will see you soon. It's gonna happen. Things will be back to normal one day, and we'll be able to hang out again, and we'll be able to have small groups. We'll be able to go to camp. We'll be able to go to mission trips. But for right now, just have faith in God, and remember, when you don't know what to do, pursue peace instead of payback.